critical thinking?
Well, look at it as this. Philosophy is sort of the branch. The critical thinking, you could say, is a tool that is used by philosophy to reach a certain judgment. Scientifically, you could say critical thinking is an objective analysis and evaluation of a particular matter to reach a judgment. Right. And the key word here is objectivity.
Yes. All right. Speaking of critical thinking, why is critical thought very important in our societies, in our communities, and so forth, for the purpose of development, of course?
Of course, you wouldn't want to have a zombie state.
Yeah.
You understand, where you have people that do not necessarily think about actually being aware of what is happening, social awareness. You know, so. It's very relevant that you have a populace that engage in critical thinking. They would then question the values, the norms. They would question what they are imposed. I mean, more often than not, you have a situation where systems usually try to indoctrinate people. They could use education systems, you know, where they indoctrinate people. We've seen during the colonial era where they would use these methods to indoctrinate people in thinking that they are inferior and a certain group of people are more superior than them. But then when you have critical thinking, all these things are not possible because the citizens will be able to think critically,
right?
Regardless of the powers that may be.
Speaking of philosophical thinking, and most of us always double backing and thinking it's an ancient Greek type of philosophy or philosophical thing, where does it stem from, in your opinion?
Well, philosophy, it's a human thing, understand? For as long as we are human beings, you have a brain to think. So, you know, it's the whole, if you look at our educational systems, our social institutions, our economical institutions, they are more sort of Western institutions, understand? Yeah. So it's very easy then, because of the education systems and so on, that sort of models, we have derived these models from the Western. So it's very easy to say, well, philosophy is only restricted to the Western cultures. But that's not true. Of course, there are a number of reasons. If you look at their philosophy, the Western, most especially the Greeks, there were authors that would write books. So their philosophy was then passed on in books, in writing. But if you look at African philosophy, for instance, there was that absence of writing. Understand, ours was different, you know, it was passed on through music, for instance, understand, storytelling, you know, so it was a little bit difficult to point out exactly to say this is African philosophy. Right. Whereas it's easier for obviously to point out to say, well, this is Aristotle that wrote this, so it's Western philosophy, understand?
So documentation of a certain type of philosophy also plays a role, and preservation thereof. Let's touch on the concepts of Harambe and Ubuntu, which are mainly Southern African and East African. Harambe and Ubuntu, looking at social and socio-political philosophies there. Does Namibia have a philosophy of its own? Let me put it in that way.
You see, when you talk about Namibia, you're talking about a state, a country. If you look at pre-colonialization, these states, they came about after colonialization, during and after colonialization. The states were created by cohesion, you know, the boundaries. To say I'm Namibian, I'm South Africa, these boundaries are arbitrary boundaries. They were imposed by the colonial regimes, understand? So when you're talking about African philosophy, it was in the absence of these arbitrary boundaries. You know what I mean? Ubuntu is an African concept about humanism, togetherness, oneness. So when you talk about Harambe, for instance, being a principle of Ubuntu, because it speaks volumes to moving in the same direction, all of us. You know, I mean, you have an African proverb, obviously, that says that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, you must go together. Yes. And so it's Ubuntu, togetherness, that it takes a village to raise a kid, for instance.
So it's all about breaking down the barriers of and the boundaries that were imposed on Africa by the colonizers. Is that what you're saying? That basically Harambe, Ubuntu, it's an African philosophy that goes beyond borders, that also belongs to Namibia.
Precisely.
All right. Gabriel, let's talk about this. Where in the Namibian society can we see critical thinking being really utilized before we wrap up?
Well, that's what motivated me to be here today, understand? Because there is, I feel or love to believe that there is an absence of really platforms that would enable young people and all people alike to engage in these critical dialogues, to engage in issues that would bring about cross-examination of our belief systems, or issues that then would enable us to find amicable solutions to our current problems. I could give you an example. These are not material problems, it could be immaterial problems. An example could be, for instance, patient killing. Everybody's talking about patient killing. Of course, our scientists cannot find a solution to that. You know, you don't need chemicals and all that cannot bring a solution to that. What will then bring a solution to that? It's if we engage, trying to find time and space to understanding this problem, looking at its underlying forms. Understand? By using ideas, then only we could perhaps find a solution to this.
Dialogue.
Yes, dialogue, of course.
All right, Gabriel, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Right.
It's all about speaking, using critical methods, of course, with critical thinking, philosophy, and including all these together to find solutions. It's Gabriel Haulyamayi, a political science student that was here to talk to us about these factors. Do stay tuned. We'll be back with more here on Good Morning Namibia.